Have you ever wanted to know if your previous stress impacts your current health? Hello, my successful and healthy earthlings. Mihaela here, naturopath and founder of the Natural Health Podcast. In this episode, you will learn how stress affects you, and then I'm going to answer the almighty question of, does old stress impact your current health? We're going to go into how stress affects you, then we're going to go into, does old stress affect your current health, and then 3 tips to manage your stress. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast. We bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve optimal health and success. It's Mondays with Mihaela. That's right, me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Absolutely love, and appreciate your support. On Mondays, I'm here to provide you with simple, savvy, and sustainable health hacks to optimize your health. And in today's episode, it's going to be such an interesting one because I'm talking about all things stress. If you know me, you know I love talking about stress and how it impacts you. But I've had a lot of people ask me and go, well, Mihaela, I've had this stress happen about 10 years ago. How does that impact my current health? Or does it even impact my current health? And that's why I thought I'll do this podcast, so we get a little bit clearer about stresses, right? So let's look into how a stress affects you. So we're going to talk about stress and the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Love this axis, right? I might talk a little bit sciencey, but I'll wrap it up for you, right? So when we're exposed to stressful situations, if that may be, trauma, there might be death, if that might be an accident, if that may be a job loss, financial, whatever that may be, to every individual, it may be different, right? Or if it may be just perceived stress in our head, things happening and us getting anxious about it, right? So exposure to this stressful situation, whatever that is for yourself, affects key stress mediating systems, and this one of them being the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which I love, also short for HPA. Acute stresses typically activate this HPA axis, which launches a cascade of adaptive hormonal and behavioral responses that allow us to respond to threats or challenges effectively. So if we didn't have this, we wouldn't be able to deal with it effectively. So when someone says to me, stress is bad, I say, no, stress keeps us alive, right? So despite its short-term adaptive value, chronic or frequent adaptation of the HPA axis can lead to hypo or hyperactive reactivity, which has often been interpreted as dysregulation. So when someone says there might be dysregulation in your HPA axis, you can keep it barking. He wants to be involved in this podcast like always. Anyway, so when we're talking about dysregulation, this may be either hypo or hypo reactivity. That's what we're talking about, right? Although dysregulation may occur in response to accumulation of activations throughout life. So if something happened back in the days, your hypothalamus pituitary axis may be activated and then activated again. This is this accumulation. It has been hypothesized that there are sensitive periods in the years of life where stress exposure may have a much more profound effect. And this is what we're going to go into and talk about today. When you're exposed to stress in your life, when does it affect you the most? And do you carry it on throughout life? Right, so let's talk a little bit about HPA, right? So HPA axis orchestrates a neuroendocrine response to threats and challenges by mobilizing energetic resources throughout the body, right? Cortisol is the primary end product of the HPA axis in us humans. Cortisol levels have a dineural rhythm in that they peak levels around time of morning and decline throughout the day, and they reach about 30 minutes after onset of nighttime sleep. However, when individuals experience stress, this gets chucked out the window, and what happens is the HPA axis increases the level of circulating cortisol in our bloodstream, as cortisol typically spikes in response to an acutely stressful event and then recovers at baseline. Essentially what this is saying is, if we have a stressful event happening, it goes through the roof up high, and then it goes back to our baseline, whatever that baseline is for every individual. Cortisol reactivity to stress is a widely studied psychological phenomenon. Healthy individuals typically show a peak in cortisol around 25 minutes after the onset of the acute stressor. So essentially, if touch wood, if there's a car accident that occurs, your cortisol will be the highest about 25 minutes after that car accident. It won't be as the car accident happens, it won't be hours later, it'll be 25 minutes, right? And then what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to return to baseline about an hour and 10 minutes after, right? But that doesn't occur to all the individuals. So importantly, the activations of these typical transforms come in two forms, in hyperactivity and hypoactivity. Let's go a little bit into them. Hyperactivity is a result of impairment in negative feedback regulation, such as the system remains elevated for a prolonged period once activated. So it stays up and it doesn't go down after an hour. It may stay up for 2, 3, 4 hours. Hyperactivation, or the blunting of the system, appears to be due to increases in negative feedback regulation and or regulation of the response of corticotropin releasing hormone and the pituitary gland. Either way, if it is hypo or hyper, in these cases there is a dysregulation that may be happening in the HPA axis, and just because you're coping with stress, and that has a cost in terms of subsequent health and well-being. It may affect it, right? I'm going to chuck in a few little studies here about how old stress may be affecting us, and I'm going to go into how it actually affects us, right? So a study of college women found that those who were exposed to 2 or more types of violence during their childhood showed lower cortisol reactivity to a stress test, than women who had no experience of violence. Another study, literature suggests that adolescents who were abused produced greater levels of cortisol for more prolonged periods in response to acute stress than non-abused adolescents, but it's only when they have mild to moderate depression. This is an interesting thing that we're going to chuck in there, right? One study found that being separated from both parents during childhood due to World War II was likewise associated with enhanced cortisol response to stress in adulthood. So dysregulation that is caused by persistent activation of this HPA axis system can produce alterations in our brain. This is what I wanted to get to, right? It can cause alterations into our brain. So now we're going to look at, does previous stress actually impact you, and how does it impact you? I found a study, of course I have, like I always do, that was released in 2020 last year, and it was, oh my gosh, this study just blew my mind because it was a long-term study. But essentially what this is saying is that life stress can potentially alter aggregations of the HPA axis and has been associated with poorer physical and mental health, right? But little do we know the actual effects, and this is what this study, they explored 3 models of influence of stress. These 3 models are: 1, the accumulative stress model, which suggests that accumulative stress across the lifespans leads to dysregulation, reactivity. And then they've got the biological amending model, implicates that early childhood as a critical period. So the accumulative stress model suggests that we accumulate stress through our life and it impacts us. The biological embedding model agrees with that, but it says that childhood is a critical period. And then we have the cessational model, which assumes that dysregulation should only occur when stress is high in both early childhood and concurrently, right? This is saying that this will only be activated if you keep having stress. It will have to. All of these models predicted altered reactivity, but do not anticipate exact form, okay? So the accumulative stress model predicts that stress across the lifetime accumulates, eventually resulting in dysregulation in cortisol reactivity in adulthood. Thus, according to this model, individuals who are exposed to more stress across their lifestyles should be more likely to exhibit dysregulation, right? Let's look at the study. So the study is interesting because in 1975 and 1976, 267 pregnant women were recruited from Minnesota longitudinal study of risk and adaptation. All of the mothers were living below the poverty line and were receiving healthcare services from a public healthcare clinic. The children of these mothers were the target participants of the study. So they took these kids, these 267 kids, to be target of this study back in the 70s. 120 participants completed a 37-year assessment. So this was through 37 years, right? But only 116 participated, had non-missing saliva results, and at the end, they only ended up with 112 participants, which is still a high number of participants. 65 females and 47 males. At 37 years old, they came in to do an assessment. This is where it's so interesting. They provided, I'll show you a graph of actually what happened. So as you can see here, as they arrived, they rinsed their mouths. If you're watching this on YouTube on a channel, you can see the timeline of what's happened when they came in at the 37 years old. They came in and they arrived, they rinsed their mouth, they provided one sample, they had a survey, they provided a second sample of saliva, a cortisol level, and they had a test, a stress test, and then they provided a third sample, they did a survey, provided a fourth sample, did a survey, provided the fifth sample to see how they react to stress, right? But back in the days, what's actually happened at previous sessions, the participants also had tests done and examined at 12, 18, 30, 42, 48, 54, 64 months of age, grade 1 to 3, grade 6, and ages 16 and 17. At that stage, their mothers completed a life event schedule. And then at the ages of 23, 26, 32, 34, and now at 37, the same interview was given to the participants to complete. So this life event schedule was designed to ask the mothers about stressful events that affected them since the last interview, and over the years if the mothers yet had passed between assessments, just anything stressful that happened, a job change, a divorce, income shortage, debt, or anything like those. And then the individuals had to complete it themselves to see if any stressful event occurred. This is where the magic occurred. I can't believe that these individuals took these tests for so many years and they continue to do this for science. So the results, are you ready for it? They found support for both accumulative and biological amending effects. However, when pitted against each other, early life stresses predicted more blunted cortisol response at the age of 37 over and above cumulative life stresses. Additional analysis revealed that stress exposure in middle childhood also predicted more blunted cortisol reactivity. So essentially, it found true of the two models, which was the accumulative and the biological. The accumulative said that we accumulate stress through our life. The biological said we do that, but stresses that occurred early in childhood have more of an effect. So they found both of those to be true. The one that they didn't find to be true is the sensational model, which was not correct in this study, which assumes that early life experience conditions, the way in which the HPA responds to stress later in life, it anticipates that the HPA functioning should depend on the levels of early life stress exposure on the level of current stress exposure. And HPA only activated when they also experience high level in the current stress life. So this is saying that even if you are not stressed at the moment or don't have a stressful event, your HPA axis may be blunted due to previous stress that you had as a child, as an early adult, and so forth. This blows my mind. So essentially, this is saying that past stress affects your current health, affects your current HPA axis. Now that you know that, I think it's going to change so many things. I think it's going to change how you look at things, and I think it's going to change how you look at health, how you look at stress overall, because this is saying that we need to know how to deal with our stress. We need to raise our kids. We need to ensure that they understand what stress is. We need to ensure that they know how to deal with their stress so it doesn't impact them as much as it would later on in life if they didn't know this. Let's go into 3 tips how you can manage your stress. Number 1, therapy. I know as soon as I say that, a lot of people are like, oh no, I'm not crazy, I don't need therapy. No, it doesn't mean you're crazy. Therapy is absolutely amazing. If trauma occurred in childhood, it is key to deal with this with a psychologist, a counselor, a therapy, anything along those lines that you feel is suitable for you. There's so many counselors, there's so many amazing therapies out there. But you have to find the right one for you and deal with this stress so you can let go so you can release and live a happy and healthy life right now. The other one too is sleep. As we know, and in my previous episodes, as I've said, is when stressful events occur, we need to sleep so our brain is able to organize it. So our brain is able to organize it and deal with it in its way, and able to release us from the events that have occurred, and able to come back to a baseline cortisol levels. So we're not always high on cortisol due to stressful events. Number 3 is breathing. Let's do it together. Breathing can help us regulate our autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for making us activated and making us relaxed, right? We need to ensure that we are breathing. We need to teach our kids to breathe. We need to breathe whenever we're stressed so we can reduce our cortisol levels so they're not going through the roof. Don't get me wrong, high cortisol levels at the right time are the best thing that can happen. However, elevated for a very long time or not being activated at all is a huge issue, and this is what we need to work on. So there you have it. I hope I answered that question. Does old stress impact your current health? The answer is yes, 100% it does, but it's up to us to deal with it. It's up to us to educate ourselves and to ensure that we are sleeping well, to ensure that we are dealing well with our stress. Do what you do best. Love, like, share, subscribe to the Natural Health Podcast so you get notified every time there is a new episode, because I've got so many coming up that you're going to absolutely love. I also interview some absolutely amazing individuals all around the world to get you the best information that you need to know about your health. So there you go. Do what you do best. Love, like, share this episode to anyone that has been stressed before and has wondered, does stress impact my current health? And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health.